All right, guys, we're going to get started. Let's go to the first slide. So we did some slides on, and we had some discussion defining culture, cultural entities, cultural objects. So we're going to pick up from there, and we're going to talk about this term, which I'm fairly certain everybody here has heard. Maybe majority of people have heard. But what we're going to try, so this is, unlike a lot of the terms that I define and I, spend a lot of time talking about. I realized I stopped my sentence because it was wrong. So I wasn't subjecting you to it. Never mind that. Let's talk about, so cultural appropriation, here's what I mean to say about it. My guess is that a lot of you right now, this is one of these concepts, like others I've spoken about, where I'm going to suggest to you, if you feel like you understand this concept very well, and it's a fairly straightforward, obvious thing, when and where it applies, that might not be the case. Tell me if it is the case at the end of the lecture. So we've started defining culture. We're going to continue talking, nuancing, debating the concept, and we're going to get into this debate about cultural appropriation. We won't finish it because it's controversial. So there's lots to talk about. Let's go on. So what do we mean by culture? There's various ways to approach culture. And schematically, in a broad sense, we can consider these two contrasts. So I've got two different approaches and then contrasting accounts within those traditions. You could say academic traditions. You have the social science way of life, which we discussed, which Yaya brought up. Culture is a whole way of life. And this is often, I mentioned that a lot of hip-hop discourse references culture in this way. So even rappers and hip-hop theorists from within the culture are describing culture in this way, as a whole way of life. And if you recall, we were talking last time about the idea of rap versus hip-hop, which was a phrase popularized by KRS-One, but has really taken off. Lots of people use that as a sort of a theoretical rubric, as a distinction, important distinction to make, the difference between rap and hip-hop. The former being, rap is something you do, hip-hop is something you live. Something you live is, of course, you can see how this is alluding to this concept of hip-hop as culture and culture as a way of life. So not reducible to the kind of music you make or the kind of music that you listen to, but a broader range of elements, as we've discussed, values, as we've discussed, in different ways that people attempt to itemize those values. And we have sort of the core four elements. We have the fifth element. And we've also discussed how categorizing things is eminently necessary. We can't have knowledge. We can't have debates. We can't write stuff. We can't think about things without categories. But we were also debated and nuanced how, the relevance of keeping in mind the limits of categories and the fact that all categories are socially constructed, and even as they are necessary and they allow us to do certain things, they simultaneously disallow us from doing something that a different set of categories, an alternate choice of categories, or alternate way of defining the categories would enable us to do. Another way to say that is, every way of telling a story is a silencing of another way of telling that story, right? It's a choice. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to play you this little clip from this dude. Maybe some of you guys have heard of him before. He's talking about, specifically he's talking about language. He's a famous linguist, as it says right there. And he's talking about the way language is assumed, the way we assume language boundaries to be clear and distinct. We all know, everybody here speaks English. I assume, otherwise you're pretty awesome. You're doing great if you're not speaking English and you've lasted this long. But we assume that we know what it is, and we assume that it's this clear distinction between the other languages that we can identify, whether or not we speak them. But the way that, what I want you to keep in mind while you're listening to this 2 minutes, this 2-minute clip of a longer interview, is everything he's saying about language you can apply in a broader sense to culture. So the challenge that he presents here in this little clip I'm going to play to the idea that languages are discretely bounded, easily knowable, apolitical, just matter-of-factly distinct. He's going to challenge that with respect to language, and I want you to hear culture while he's saying that. Let's go ahead and play it.
Or like Italian, and at some point it becomes Italian. And there isn't, in fact, by now there's enough national unity and so on, so you can really find a border. But if you go back a little ways, there was no border. There was just I wouldn't say a continuum. There's just constant changes and fluctuations and variations. And you started speaking one thing in one place and another thing in another place, and they're not mutually intelligible often. But along the way, there are just all sorts of changes. Now, with the rise of national states, and especially national communications and national education systems and all of these things, which is a pretty modern phenomenon, then you get what we call national languages. Now, as I say, English is unusual. The reason, after all, go to pre-colonial times, there were just hundreds of thousands, probably, of different languages spoken in what's now called the United States. Well, through the destruction of the indigenous population, and it was real destruction, kind of genocidal, and the conquest by speakers of basically one group, you ended up having a large homogeneous language. But how could anybody have predicted that? It had to do with the invention of guns and
whole series
political conquest and all sorts of things. And that's pretty much what human history is.
There are some French theorists, for example, who argue that they must work very hard to keep the French language pure. What does that mean?
It doesn't mean anything. There's an old, virtually every national language, every national culture, or at least the European ones, maybe others, has a mythology that that's the only real pure language, and all the others are corrupt. In France, this position is kind of extreme. In fact, if you go back to its origin.
Next slide. So what Chomsky's arguing here is, and I meant to include the question from the interviewer, but what the interviewer had asked him is what is it that makes languages distinct, or what is people say that the French language is special, it's unique, it's got these properties, and he's responding to that, and he's saying all of this is these are fabrications. These are post facto fabrications. He described. He started off talking about the language which is called Italian, but in the longer interview, and you can watch it, it's on YouTube. In the longer interview, the interviewer comes back and he insists, and he gives more detail talking about French and other languages, and explains that this geographic territory, which is the modern nation state of France, which claims to be based on culture, right? So the claim is that what makes the French nation the French nation is the qualities, the properties, the values, the particularities of French culture, French language, French culture. And that's what defines France. That is the a priori explanation for French identity, French solidarity. And then the nation state is a logical consequence of that shared culture. That's the standard story. And he says that's repeated with, many other national ideologies, across what we call the modern nation state. But he says this is a fabrication. That geographic territory prior to the establishment of that modern nation state, which was established through violence and colonialism, and parallel and similar processes, war, conquest, etc. The people who existed in that territory spoke all kinds of variants that change. If you go from one area and then you go a long distance to another area, those languages, the way people are speaking, it's not even languages, right? The way people are speaking human is mutually unintelligible when you travel long distances. But the closer you get, if you look at the distances from one community to the adjacent community, the differences are slow or gradual, exist on a continuum. So where you draw the line from where one language begins and another one ends is arbitrary. And arbitrary doesn't mean random. It means that it was set by socio-historical processes which have nothing to do with the after-the-fact claim about where this language and this culture, quote-unquote, naturally borders. In cultural, and thinking of, you remember how we defined racial essentialism, and I defined for you two variants of racial essentialism. The one, people who are familiar with, most people said they're familiar with, the idea that at least the phrase, race is a social construct. So when we first learn about that, if we're first taught that in classes or wherever, what that's contrasted with is the idea that race is a biological or a genetic fact, right? And that claim that race is some kind of genetic, biological property of individuals, not something that is relationally, socially, socio-historically established through the processes that we've been discussing. That is that's the biological essentialist narrative. But there is also a cultural essentialist narrative. So just because somebody claims just because someone says, I understand race is not biological, or I understand such and such a group is not genetically or biologically superior than some other group, but it just happens to be a fact that the culture of this group that they like, let's say Western civilization, right? Western culture, or French culture, whatever, or British culture, just happens to be superior for X, Y, or Z reasons, right? And if that sounds absurd, it is, but apparently a lot of people buy into it, or try to get you to buy into it. So the claim here, what I want to emphasize, there's all kinds of things to disarticulate there, but relating that to the video you just saw, I want you to hear that distinction between understanding the relationality of these categories and any kind of categories. The relationality, that the identity, whatever the identity is always being and cannot otherwise be, constructed in contradistinction to a disidentity. Right? So there's no such thing as French culture without, there's no way to claim French culture or the coherence or the existence of French culture without at the same time claiming that there is something which is not French culture. And even if you don't explicitly say anything about that which is not French culture, everything that you are claiming is unique or special or particular about French culture, you are implicitly saying is not true about whatever it is that is not French culture, right? But when people are thinking, speaking in essentialist terms, they are either not recognizing or not acknowledging this relational notion of identity or language or culture or politics or race or whatever. So in cultural studies, one of the core things that we are aiming to do here, I maybe should have put these the other way around, understand the relationship between culture and politics. This is at the heart of the central question of cultural studies. And a key part of that is to understand, is to avoid essentialism, avoid cultural essentialism, and by extension, all kinds of essentialisms that are causing us to miss the dynamics of power, the historical contingencies that shape the present world and the categories that we matter-of-factly deploy and the things that we think we see, which are self-evident, and the assumptions that we make, which are obvious, we don't need an argument for. Come on, don't be crazy. Obviously, this is true, right? All of these are cultural, in Wendy Griswold's terms, I quoted before, and are cultural objects. I prefer the term cultural entities. Memes, assumptions, proverbs, parables, axioms. We're all in different disciplines, so some of these will resonate with some people, right? But these are all suppositions that are just sort of taken for granted. What Antonio Gramsci called common sense, right? And what we want to be doing, here I'll quote Chuck D of Public Enemy, is what Chuck D says whenever anybody brings up common sense. He says, yes, but sense has never been common. So cultural hegemony is a core central point of departure in cultural studies, and we're going to talk about what hegemony means. I've been alluding to it, I've defined it a little bit, but we'll get to it. Next slide. Okay, we did this slide already, so let's skip this. Basic units of culture, cultural objects. I've shown you this slide and assigned it to you, so let's go to the next one. Okay, let's stay here for a second. Yeah, I gave you actually a better version of this slide, but this is what we were last class. Mason and I were discussing this distinction, and he pointed out, you recall, he pointed it out that the way I had worded commodification had all these sort of negative synonyms. I had phrased it in this kind of negative way, and by contrast, the way that I've got culture and cultural objects written here, if it's not neutral, it's positive, right? And then in contrast, yes, so that's an interesting, I said it's an interesting cultural studies way of doing a close reading, looking for the bias, and he exposed me and made you all see through my facade of objectivity, and made it clear that actually I have a problem with the way some things like hip-hop and human beings are commodified. Next slide. I'm not the only one. Let's watch this video.
No, seriously, like everyone's got it all wrong. I definitely have like some really strong opinions and some really strong things to say about things, but they're never like, I'm never trying to force like my opinion or like make
But it's
you.
just you're into your thing.
It's just like, this is what I think.
Yeah.
And
So fast forward to where we are today, right? And the whole Azalea Banks thing, because in that moment where you was popping on 212, there was other female MCs who was coming on at that time, right? So then we start hearing from Iggy Azalea. Rosenberg, you said to me today, and I was like, I don't even understand how things got sideways. Didn't Iggy Azalea and her start at the same time? What happened? And you told me.
I said that there are people out there who believe that the source of this issue is that Iggy came later and straight up jacked the name from Azalea Banks. Because, I mean, the name Azalea Banks was already out and a thing when anyone first heard of Iggy Azalea. So there are those that believe that Iggy simply saw the name Azalea Banks, was like, I like that name, and
straight ran with it.
And that could be the source of original tension.
What's your perspective on it?
Okay, so here's the thing with Iggy Azalea. This is the thing. I feel just like in this country, whenever it comes to our things like black issues or black politics or black music or whatever, there's always this like undercurrent of kind of like a fuck you. There's always like a fuck y'all niggas. Like, y'all don't really own shit. Like, y'all don't have shit. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that Macklemore album wasn't better than the Drake record.
And Macklemore admitted his album wasn't better than Kendrick.
You know what I mean? That Iggy Azalea shit is not better than any fucking black girl that's rapping today, you know? And when they give those awards out, because the Grammys are supposed to be like accolades for artistic excellence. You get what I mean? Iggy Azalea is not excellent, you know? And the message I see when I see these Grammys being given out, like these, because it's bigger than just like playing the shit on the radio and I don't give a fuck, you know what I mean? Like, that's fine, bitch. Like, do what you're gonna do. But I have a problem when you're trying to like say that it's hip hop and you're trying to like put it like up against black culture. Like, it's like a cultural smudging was what I see. And when they give these Grammys out, all it says to white kids is like, oh yeah, you're great, you're amazing, you can do whatever you put your mind to. And it says to black kids, you don't have shit, you don't own shit, not even the shit you created for yourself. And it makes me upset.
Businesses capitalize on that.
And that's fine. So put her in the pop category. Put her with Katy Perry and put her and Miley Cyrus in the same fucking box together.
Don't put her in hip hop.
Don't put her in hip hop.
But she's rapping over a beat though.
But just because she's not singing does not mean it's rap music.
I attacked Nicki's pop record. I didn't attack Iggy's fancy record because at the time I didn't know the level of cultural appropriation we were watching at the time.
Bro, you still don't.
Of
Just
her
saying.
then being embraced and fancy becoming the quintessential rap song.
record.
That sucks.
But this
You
ain't
got
the
two
first.
white
But this
women
ain't the
singing
first
a rap-
time. But
No.
this ain't the first time.
All
At
right,
this-
look. Now everybody knows that like the basis of modern capitalism is like slave labor, like really just like the selling and trading of these slaves. Like, there are fucking like huge corporations that are still like, you know,
Yes.
caking off that slave
Yes.
money and shit like that.
The entire country.
Right. So until y'all motherfuckers are ready to talk about what y'all owe me, whether the number 7 trillion or 8 trillion or 9 trillion, at the very fucking least, y'all owe me the right to my fucking identity and to not exploit that shit. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's all we're like holding on to, like hip hop and rap and like Bill Cosby or whatever the fuck it is. Like, that shit is fucking like too timely. That's too timely that like you have like Eric Garner and Mike Brown and like
And then they
Trayvon
throw
Martin,
Bill
and then y'all
Cosby's
fucking
old
talking about
stories.
Bill Cosby. Like, what the fuck? What does that have to do with any? Y'all putting that shit on like TV for the kids to see, like for the youth to fucking see. You know, and it's happening like back to back to back to back to back. And I get it, you know, it's like, all right, whatever, like, you know, we're gonna march, we're gonna do this, but like, no, we really have to talk about this. Like, I gotta be the bitter black bitch because I like have something to say about it.
Because you have feelings.
And then here you got fucking coon head ass T.I. Like, T.I., you out here trying to fucking promote this white bitch. Like, they got your wife on VH1. Whitey got your wife on VH1 and that bitch can't fucking read. You understand? You got
So
your
that's
priorities
really how
fucked up.
That's really how you feel about
That's really
T.I.
how I fucking feel about
But Their wealth is founded upon the exploitation, the commodification of millions of human beings. It's founded upon the greatest crime in human history. Oh, look, I have a slide with this, some points that she made. So let's not talk too much about Ebro and Rosenberg. But I just want to, this is my impression, and this is my interpretation. You may have a different interpretation. To me, it felt like, and I didn't play their opening question, but you could tell from the context, the question is, yo, talk shit about this other chick. Talk shit about this white chick who stole your name, right? And I think they're real happy when it comes back around to this last part, you know, where, okay, now the discourse comes to talking shit about another woman because she can't read, whatever, right? But I don't think these guys were prepared for where she took that question. I don't think that's what they wanted. I think that they're looking for a particular kind of narrative, a particular kind of beef story that they commodify. See what I did there? Right? They commodify in order to market. Right? Tensions over cultural creativity, meaning, significance, value. That's not the conversation they want to have, right? What they want to have is they want to market, you know, that as as beef between these two women or these two rappers or whatever. And also, I don't know if anybody else felt this, you know, when you could tell me if you agreed or you think I'm reading too much into it, because whatever, that's what we do. We read cues. We all do this all day. We're all doing cultural studies all the time, right? But did you notice? They're like, oh yeah, what do you think about this white girl using your name? And she starts talking about, and she said all that stuff that she said, and then she said, you know, and then people gotta like marginalize me or talk shit about me or devalue what I'm talking about because, and you know what the motherfucker said? He said, because you have feelings. That's what he heard in everything. He's like, oh yeah, you're crying, you have feelings. Not you have some shit to say. Not you're talking about the real shit, and what we want to hear about is that beefy shit. That's my reading, you know? Yeah, whatever. Anybody need to jump in on this conversation, or we can keep it moving? We keep moving. All right, next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Back up one. This is from your reading for this week. I just pulled out a few quotes. What's really funny to me, you guys read this whole thing. When we go to, when we're done with the slides, open up for discussion. You can tell me what you thought about the reading, what you liked, what you hated, what questions you have from the reading, how you think it relates to what we just heard Azalea Banks break down, give her lesson for the semester. But what's interesting to me about the reading, one of the things, I'll just put up these quotes here, is this last quote: white supremacy is an equal opportunity employer. And here I have the rest of the context. Non-white people can become active agents of white supremacy as well as passive participants in its hierarchies and rewards. Something that's surprising to me is, I think that's a fairly powerful part of this fairly crucial thing to understand when you read this chapter. And I'm shocked by when I give a multiple choice question on this, without putting the slide on the screen and then talking about it, but just, when I've assigned this reading and said other things about the reading, and then there's a question like, what does Lipsitz mean by white supremacy is an equal opportunity employer, and then I have a multiple choice thing. People totally misinterpret what it is. They do not seem to remember, or they seem to read over, or they seem to miss the point, which I think is a crucial point that he makes, that when he says white supremacy is an equal opportunity employer, what he means is that there is space for non-whites to be racist against non-whites. There are rewards offered to non-whites to get down with the program. You said maybe you're going to get upset if I talk shit about anybody in a video that I just showed a few seconds ago, so I won't. But it's possible somebody might interpret some of those individuals as complicit in that kind of a process. Julia, you have your hand up? Really? Was it? Oh, that's not happening until later. So on the syllabus, which is on Canvas, which is D10. What's that? But as I've said in class, that's not the updated information. The updated information is on the PDF, which is D10, and I was very clear a couple times in class. You should download that PDF, and that is the current schedule that we're following. Not those modules, which the modules I explained are just carried over from previous years. So the readings are up there for you, but the weeks that we're doing are on your PDF of your syllabus that we gave you at the beginning of the semester. So if you read that other stuff, that's cool. That'll apply after the exam, after the midterm. But for the midterm, and for today's discussion, we're talking about George Lipsitz. Jeff, you have a question?
I just was going to say that, at least with Rosenberg specifically, I remember there was, a big controversy when...
Yeah, everybody, let's focus on what Jeff is saying.
Because, he was on this, conservative political radio show. And apparently, I guess it was recently when XXXTentacion passed away, and his first, basically the first words that came out of his mouth when he was breaking the news was this rapper died, but he was no angel. He had a lot of problems and he wasn't a great person.
Which rapper are we talking about?
XXXTentacion. He died
in
the shooting.
Yeah.
And then basically the black community came together and sort of told Rosenberg, hey, you're profiting and making all this money off the black community, and yet you're trying to paint this bad picture of us in front of your white friends and stuff. And
so I'm not the only one who has this sort of negative impression of this guy commodifying black culture for profit. Yeah. But worse than but let's get to this thing though, because it's not. You give a really good example. I don't know if everybody heard what Jeff said, but I'll summarize it. Thanks. So what Jeff was saying is that Rosenberg was on some conservative radio station. And anybody know the station? Do people know this specific example? You can shout it out if you know the station. If not, let's keep it moving. You know what? We don't need to promote any conservative radio stations. Oh, everybody knows that one anyway. Probably. Fine, we'll promote Fox. Eventually, I'm going to have to go on there, right? And knock somebody out. Of course you guys know I'm kidding. Totally all about nonviolence. 99% of the time. 98. Let's be real. Selma, 98. Come on. It's 2%. We had this conversation, right? Active shooter, you guys, Jackson, we're going to take him out. I got my man at the door. I got my girls up. You know, we got it covered, right? Yeah, we ready. Exactly. All right. So anyway, let's keep it moving. Let's focus on this. Give me a round of applause. I'm hilarious. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So yeah, let me actually finish what I was saying about Jeff's point. I want to get that, and then Selma asked a really good question here. Yeah. So white supremacy is an equal opportunity employer. So you can see from the context, if you didn't read this week's reading, as it is on the syllabus, that's cool. You read something cool about Madison. So whatever, you know, it's all good. You can talk to your friends who read this. But for some reason, people interpret that as white supremacy is something that all white people could profit from, or all white people profit from equally, or some kind of thing like that. When I just say, okay, here's, you know, of course I'm planting, you know, lies in people's heads with these multiple choice questions. I'm misleading people, right? But, you know, you won't be misled if you had read. If you was a real hip-hop. There we go. Okay, all right, let's keep it moving. So what Jeff had pointed out about Rosenberg, which was one of the two interviewers, he gave this anecdote, which I faintly recall, I don't recall. I recall this Extension, who's a rapper. I'm old. What the fuck? I don't know. What's his name? See, now I can say X. Y'all know me. I can do the X. Okay. So some guy, apparently you all know him, was killed, and that shit sucks. And this is not the first time that. Is it a young black man? What a surprise, given this context. It's a young black man, talented. I assume so. You guys know who he is. Okay, well, I think you know what you're talking about. I trust your cultural expertise on these kind of matters. So Yahya says he's talented. I believe he's talented. What I am suspicious of is not that he's talented. What I'm suspicious of is that the immediate narrative after he dies, after he's killed, that, oh yeah, well, he was no angel. Oh yeah, well, you know, he got into this. Oh yeah, well, he was. I think that shit is like some bullshit, right? And I think that is I think that all the tools, all the theoretical language that I'm giving you in this class can be mobilized, should you so desire, in your conversations about this kind of thing. You can break down, you can find out the fallacies, you can expose the fact that whether or not something is a true statement in and of itself, has a true statement can be uttered to tell a lie. How about that? You can utter a true statement, you can speak a truth in the context, remember we said all meaning is contextual, in the context of a discussion which implies or denigrates, the position of somebody else without uttering a lie. You're stating a fact which is completely irrelevant to the discussion at hand, and therefore it's called straw manning your opposition. But it's deploying culture. So, to Mason's point in our last class, when he said, when he pointed out that when I was talking about the creation of cultural meaning, everybody paying attention here? We all focused? When I was talking about the way, what culture is, or cultural objects, or cultural entities are created. It's us attributing meaning to things above and beyond their exchange value or basic use value, right? And the way that I had, and stripping away, ignoring, denigrating those meanings, that set of meanings, created by the community that creates it, creates the cultural entity that we're talking about. When those meanings are ignored, denigrated, in favor of merely the exchange value, this is commodification. And so what we were talking about on that other slide is that the way I had written the slide seemed to suggest that the commodification is always bad, and attributing cultural meaning to anything is always good. That's a very incisive comment that Mason made, and I want you to understand. And here's a great example that I don't at all mean to imply that, right? And here's a perfect example, right? So the cultural meaning that is being ascribed to black life, specifically young male black life, through those tropes, through that narrative, right? Whether or not it happens to be true of this one particular guy in this particular case, right? The utterance of it in that particular context, remember, meaning is relative to context, right? The utterance of something which may be a fact in that scenario about one particular individual is used as a narrative about a group of individuals in order to apply, in order to create, right, a cultural entity, a fabrication about people in order to denigrate those people, in order to perpetuate the shit that Azalea Banks apparently is kind of emotional about. For good fucking reason. And if you ain't emotional about it, you know, what does that say about you? Ebro. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Sorry. Okay, let's talk about this. Defining racism. If you want, I can debate Ebro. We can invite him maybe over Skype. We can have a debate in class. Defining racism. Let's talk about this, what I'm calling here an idealist approach, which I've alluded to in class before, and a materialist approach. So the idealist approach, or the liberal approach, right, drawing on Brian Barry and the way that he described, the way that he distinguished liberal justice and liberal rights and liberalism from social justice and social rights and socialism. The idealist approach, racism is discrimination based on race. Sounds straightforward, right? If we weren't in this class, if we hadn't talked about the things we talked about, if we were hanging out in the cafeteria, wherever, somebody says, what is racism really? And I was like, well, obviously it's discrimination based on race. How many people would be like, nah, bro, not right. It ain't right? You're right, it ain't right. But it sounds right to so many people. Why? It is. And also, remember we had this little discussion in class. So I put up my definition of race, and I put up the way KRS-One described race. And some people liked how concise my definition was. This one is nice and concise, right? So if you appreciate, concise, it's like makes it understandable. It's transparent. How can you argue with that? It's fact. Doesn't even seem political, does it? It's just a fact. But of course, if you've been paying attention, right? I'm saying it's all definitions are interest-laden. So a materialist definition, a materialist approach to defining racism is the relationship of the dominant racial, is reinscription of the dominant racial hierarchy. Oh, and here I've reiterated this nice, concise definition of race for you guys. If you prefer, you can use KRS-One's definition. Perfectly fine. From previous slide, which you have uploaded on Top Hat. And I also uploaded, if you guys didn't see today, I uploaded the slides from last week's lecture as well. So you could study those in preparation for the midterm. So, anybody want to comment on the distinction between... Oh, so here, I'll just draw your attention to the thing I've written here, right? The point that I make here, aside from giving these alternate definitions, and, you know, it's up to you which one, after this class, you walk out of here or whatever. You know, some of you may like the liberal definition. Some of you may think that's better, but I'm just giving you an alternative. You decide, or you make up your own. But what's the difference between saying racism is discrimination based on race versus racism is the reinscription of the dominant racial hierarchy? When you look at those definitions, what is the core difference to you? Why does it matter which one you pick? Anybody? What's at stake in picking one or the other definition? Are they equally good?
Doesn't it come
Do they
back?
serve the same interests?
Doesn't it come back to, in order to be racist, you have to hold power over a certain group, and
Who said such a thing?
white people are like hold the most power, like historically. So the second definition takes that into account.
What's that?
I said the second definition takes that into account.
Takes power into account.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So, can you tell us just a little bit more about this thing where you said in order to be racist, you must have social power?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Where'd you learn that? If you remember, or you just sort of like everybody knows this.
Yeah, I thought everyone knew that.
Okay. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? Thank you. I'm glad you know it. I'm glad some of y'all know it. Maybe you can help each one teach one, as we say in hip hop. Let's run over here. We got one more quick comment. Yeah, apparently not everybody knows it. I'm not even sure if it's true that, when Azalea Banks said, yeah, well, come on, everybody knows, and she said what everybody obviously knows. I'm not even positive everybody knows that. Everybody should know that, but why? Yeah.
So you said what definition uses like what its purpose is for, and I think the first one can be used more for individual blaming, and the second one can't really as well back that up. So it more attacks the overall concept or group that does it, or I guess you could say like structural racism, like what I mean, in society, whereas the first one can't really like back that as well.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent comment. So if the way you think about racism, whether or not you had a definition handy that you could write down or speak, if the definition sort of in the back of your head is that first one, then that suggests, and here's what I think you're saying, it sounds reasonable to me, I agree. If this is the definition in the back of your head, then that suggests that when racism happens, there's some individual who's responsible. Let's punish that individual. Let's figure out who it is. You got a complaint to register, tell us who the person is, we'll sort it out, right? And everybody can be racist against any other person, any other race, right? It's just, I suppose it doesn't even necessarily say other race, as that's what I was checking right now. Discrimination based on race. Maybe you're discriminating against somebody of your own race because you hate your own race. Maybe, But it is individual. I like that. And then I like that observation. The reinscription of the dominant racial hierarchy. So this puts it in This is also not an essentialist definition, right? It's drawing attention to power relations, as you said, and it's drawing attention to the systemic nature of oppression, right? So we're talking about oppression. We're not talking about I was offended, and well, what you find offensive, somebody else thinks is funny, and whatever. Isn't everything subjective, and who knows anyway? And isn't it impossible to define anything? No, it's not impossible. And if you act like that, you ain't gonna get shit done. Next slide. And that other point there, which you saw about one is assuming that race preceded. Let's go back 1 second. I'll just touch on that real quick. So idealism assumes race precedes racism, the idealist definition. If you say racism, discrimination based on race, the implication, the semantic logic, the syntactic logic is that there are these things called races, primordial, always existing, whatever they are. Maybe it's culture, maybe who knows, it's essential. It's always been there. For time immemorial, human beings have not been able to get together, and they don't like other people who look like them. This kind of shit, right? What's wrong with that narrative, right? It's plausible. It's not. How can you disprove it? Maybe it's true. I could muster 1 million historical facts. Maybe 1 million is being hyperbolic. But somebody could muster a whole bunch of historical facts to support that perspective, right? Time immemorial. Different people have been afraid of other people, xenophobia, right? But your choice matters because what is the implication? If that's the implication, that's how we understand racism. Oh, it's always been like that. It's always going to be like that. You may not like it. That's life. Nothing you could do about it. That's what's implied, right? So certain definitions which circulate, which are common, which we're taught, which are so basic that we don't even question, right? And these ones maybe you do question, but apply this to other things, right? What are the power relations? What are the solutions to the problems that you want to solve in your life? What solutions are suggested by the definitions available to you, right? This is, and that circulate in culture. And there's the dominant culture, there's mainstream culture, there's national culture, as Noam Chomsky described it. And then there's counter-hegemonic culture. Counter-hegemonic means culture which people are creating to challenge, to escape, to divert, to circumvent, to allow for some different kind of existence, to create some different kind of social world, when and where they don't like the dominant one. Sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad, right? I'm not suggesting that every counter-hegemonic culture is great. Maybe you heard there's some KKK groups running around or whatever, white nationalist extremists in the White House or wherever, right? You can say it's a fringe group, right? It's counter-hegemonic. It's not mainstream white supremacy. They got their hardcore brand of totally idiotic white supremacy, not rational, we're going to make a lot of motherfucking money off this. Right? That's the rational white supremacy. That's really our big problem. Right? This is an irrational white supremacist. Everything I'm saying is subject to debate. I realize that. So how are you going to call them? Whatever. But, there's the ones who don't have a lot of social power, and they got their little group, and they're trying to make them feel good about themselves. That's also kind of what we're doing in hip-hop, too. Just happens to be that we're right and they're wrong, But that's counter-hegemonic. They are inventing culture, right? So I'm not saying any invention of culture is, and any challenge to the dominant culture, mainstream culture, any counter-definition to the, D loves all these, counter-hegemonic definitions. Yes, some of them suck, okay? So this thing about racism, the relational thing, is emphasized in this second definition. So you remember when you read the chapter from Kwame Ture and from Ture and Hamilton, Black Power, they said that race, the way we describe race, the way we understand race, is historically contingent. It's based on capitalism, colonialism. It's not based on Europeans and Africans encountering each other, noticing that they're scared of each other. Not encountering each other being like, oh, you guys have different culture. You guys make food differently. You know, nope, it's not culture, right? It's material, right? It's based on the economic exploitation and commodification of human beings and the denial of the fact that human beings are human beings, of their cultural identities, their human identities, right? Not because they didn't know. This is a fundamental thing. You know, the Queen of England, did I mention this? Did I give you this Queen of England example? 2007, some diasporic African delegation, had an audience with the Queen of the UK, excuse me, not England, right? The Queen of the UK. Give her props, right? Conquered a lot of shit. And asked for an apology for the transatlantic slave trade. And the official answer, which she probably didn't draft herself, but she said, here's what it is. Sorry, brah, paraphrasing. But I feel for you guys, but it wasn't immoral at the time. It wasn't illegal at the time. It wasn't immoral at the time. Right? We just didn't realize you guys were people. We just, we didn't know. Not true. Okay? Not true. It was a choice to treat people as commodities. It was a choice to murder millions of people. That's my claim. You guys think it's radical? No, I don't. I think it's just facts. Let's go. All right. We talked about this already. Let's keep going. Let's watch a video.
He was given a portion of information from Vlad, but I don't think he really heard what was said, because he took it as saying that I said white people shouldn't be in hip-hop or they had no place in hip-hop, and I never said that in my life. You know what I mean? Like, so your whole argument is based on a supposition of wrong information. What I said was that this is black music and white people are guests in the house of hip-hop. No more, no less. All I'm saying is don't come in the house and start redecorating without talking to the motherfuckers who own the house. It's that simple. There's nothing racist about it. There's nothing, exclusionary about it. It's just facts. So to say that I'm ignorant when really your answer was based in ignorance of what I had said is kind of ironic. But I forgive you, my man. I ain't got no hard feelings against none of y'all, because guess what? You have the right to disagree with what I say, just like I have the right to disagree with what you say. And I don't have to resort to calling you, names and, you know what I mean? All this other shit to try to prove my point, because my shit is rooted in intelligence. I deal with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. It's not about being racist. Like I said, plenty of white people have contributed to hip-hop, okay? But they're not the originators of it, okay? You're coming in after the fact, and that's cool.
That was Lord Jamar defending his comments, saying, what was the original comment? It was, white people are guests in the house of hip hop. That was his tagline. So apparently, it set off this whole debate. There's all kinds of people on YouTube talking about it. Let's watch this clip. Yeah.
Well, you know, I've interviewed Joel Ortiz and Slaughterhouse and Crooked Eye about this, and they're signed to Eminem, so they're gonna have a certain.
So then bias. He went further and criticized Eminem. You can't do that.
The way they talk, you know what I mean? And that's,
what is he doing?
They'll admit the same thing. They both felt that Eminem shouldn't be thrown in the same hat as Timberlake and Macklemore. What do you think?
Why not? I mean, he's doing the same thing that they're doing. Why not be thrown in with them? What are we saying bad about them? We're just stating facts here.
Maybe the skill level. Well, yeah, I see what
you're
saying.
He's so skilled.
They're all white. They're all white people that do black music. What? Why? What's different about him?
Most people consider him more skilled than the other two.
He is probably more skilled than the other two as far as, you know what I mean? Yeah, he is skilled. But at the same time, oh my goodness. It's like he's not the most skilled motherfucker I've ever heard in my life. Like, he's good, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, I don't feel Eminem. And most people that I know don't feel him. Because he talks some shit that black people don't really relate to. I don't relate to killing my mother and my fucking girl and taking pills and all this stupid shit. Like, that's what a lot of white dudes rhyme about. Like how far they can take it on the crazy meter. You know what I mean? I'll pull out your guts and I'll fucking eat them and then I'll throw them back at you. Like, that's dumb shit. I don't want to hear that type of shit. And most dudes that I know don't want to hear that type of shit. Now, I don't give a fuck how technically good it is. I don't care how technically good it is. That doesn't mean nothing to me. This dude's with very simple flows, but I could appreciate the soul that they're putting into this shit. You see, like, there's no soul in that shit, regardless how mechanically good it is. You see? And that's the difference. That's what y'all motherfuckers is missing. You're taking out the soul and thinking just because you're doing the mechanics of something that makes you the shit. Damn, you don't even understand. You see? To think that means you don't even understand what hip hop is about, really. Because it's not just about who.
Go back. You don't even understand what hip hop is about. You think it's just flibbity, flabbity, blibbity, blabbity, gibbity, get minute. Yeah. Hi, kids. Do you like violence? Would you like to see me stick 9-inch nails through each one of my eyelids? Try sitting and get fucked up worse than my life is? I mean, he's good. Don't get me wrong. He is good. Yeah. He can spit it. He can spit it. Right? What do you guys think? Lord Jamar, is he a jerk? Let's open it up for discussion. We got 10 minutes for discussion. Let's go. Right over here. All right. I had a hand here and then up here. Well, since age 12, I felt like a caged out. Yeah.
So, like, the first rapper I started listening to was Eminem, and like a lot of other people, and I understand what he's saying.
Was Eminem like a gateway drug, and then you got into like
exactly
the real shit?
Yeah.
You see? Bam! They gotta get little doses. Okay, go ahead.
But like, just like
can't start with Professor D. Come on now. I'm sorry.
Just like going through Eminem's background and like, you know, where he came from. Like, he did come from a majority black town, right, in Detroit, and he did live with a lot of black people. And his mother was a drug addict. His dad was deadbeat. You know.
It's true. It's true. His mother was a drug addict.
Yeah. And I'm guessing.
I don't want to tell you how I know that. I'm kidding.
That was a good one.
Thank you.
But No, but what I'm trying to say is like, I mean, what I think hip hop.
Are we recording this shit? I'm sorry.
No, I'm gonna take that down. I'm gonna
Yeah,
write that.
it's already
Yeah. But like obviously hip hop is subjective, right? You have your likes and dislikes, but I feel like since Eminem has like this background and you know he's saying that in his music, isn't that what hip hop is about? Talking about your life, right? Is what I think, and I don't. I mean, I know people. I know people can relate to that. I can't relate to that, but it's cool to see somebody put so much emotion in their music. You know, obviously he's talking about killing his mom, which is weird, but like that's what he thinks, and that's what
some people hate their mom.
That's his emotion, yeah. And so
maybe his mom was a really bad person.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she beat him.
But this is my question to you. But this is my question to you. You said, "Isn't that what hip hop is about?" And what is hip hop about in the way that you described it?
For me,
yeah,
this is subjective.
Sure.
I think like
doesn't mean it's not open to debate, right?
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can debate it. So for you understand hip hop as being about what?
I feel like hip hop, when people talk about their life, you know, where they come from, regardless of where they come from, but when they talk about those kind of things, you know, real shit, right?
Yeah.
Is what I think hip hop is.
Okay, so we got a lot of other people, so I got to get to other people. Yeah. But if we have more time, here's the questions. We'll go up here and then right here. Let me say a couple things. If we have more time to talk about it, these are the things I would want to tease out. Everything you said, lots of people say that. It's very, you know, these are common things, and these are critical debates, right? So that is a way to think about what hip hop is. Now, but remember what are the values of hip hop that we've studied, right? Think about the elements of hip hop that we've studied, right? MC and he's got it down. Rap versus hip hop. If this was rap, who can rap their ass off? That's a different kind of conversation, which Lord Jamar says, I'm not trying to have that conversation. I'm talking about culture, right? I'm talking about what we want to hear, right? Because we talked about representing, right? So remember the difference between liberal and social justice that we started with, right? So there's this individual thing, right? So lots of people think, you know, lots of people describe hip hop the way you did, and I think there's a lot of good reasons to talk about it that way, right? Talk about your life, your experience, what you know. That's your contribution, right? Because that's what you can really authoritatively speak about, is the argument. But notice how there's this focus on the individual in that particular kind of definition, and look at how, and I can criticize lots of what Lord Jamar says, but what I want to draw your attention to, just to contrast, is notice how he is talking about communal values and shared values of a particular community, right? And how that relates also to what Azalea Banks was saying, right? So, like, you know, what it's about.
Hey.
You have the mic.
Yeah.
And then when you're done, before I comment, we'll come to you.
Okay.
Right here.
I feel like what makes like a good rapper or a great rapper is somebody that has both of those things that's on the board: soul and culture and technical skill.
Okay.
So
is that three things or two things?
I mean, I feel like okay, we can put a comment in there, I guess. So.
Yeah. I mean, no, either or, right?
Soul,
we could say
culture,
soul is like to have
skill.
soul is to be in the culture, or we could say, yeah, you know the culture, but you ain't got no soul.
Yeah. So like, I feel like one. For starters, you don't have to have a background such as Eminem's to be considered like applicable to rap. Like, yeah, he had a fucked up childhood, but so did I. I'm not gonna pick up a pen and write.
Speak up a little bit. I know you know, but
I'm okay.
Let's break it down because we got 5 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be real.
We're gonna do attendance. This time.
Can we count them off? Raise your hand if you're here.
So you got your 2 minutes.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's why I just kind of feel like. I mean, I feel like rap is standing for rhythm and poetry. So I mean, as long as y'all got that I guess you can rap. But like my thing is also like soul and culture is what ties.
Did y'all get that? Rhythm and poetry, rap, acronym, BAM, continue?
So and so like I feel like, but rap music and hip hop music in general is what gave people of color, specifically African Americans, a voice. And so like not so technical skill, that's just like a quality that you should have. But I feel like out of everything, soul and culture is like the main two things. It's just like, this is what I need. This is what I need to, in order to resonate with the people that's listening to my music. You get what I'm saying? So like Eminem ain't never did half the stuff he rapped about. He ain't never killed his mama. His mama's still here. His daddy was gone.
That's probably good. That's probably not like a...
Yeah, he ain't killed Kim yet. So hopefully he's straight. Haley's good. Everybody's straight. And which is weird because I'm an Eminem fan. Like I love Eminem.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, so that was about it. I'm gonna just get this mic away.
Okay, right here. There we go. There we go. All right, break it down. Dan, you want to throw the attendance up once I'm done with my final comments? Yeah.
I was just gonna comment on like your comment when you like. I know you were saying it as a joke, but like when he stated, I'm sorry. What's his name?
Speak a little closer into the mic.
What's his name? Who spoke?
You can ask him.
He's not looking.
My brother, right here. You got a question for you.
What's your name? I'm sorry. Sheena.
Shayna.
So in Sheena, when you made the comment of like making a joke as like, oh, he had a dose of Eminem and stuff like that, I know it was a joke, but it was just going back to Azalea's comment when she was like,
what was the joke?
When you made like a joke, oh, he had a dose of Eminem, so he got into hip hop about it.
Oh yeah, right.
Right. So I was just making the comment of like, it's basically like when you think about how people think hip hop and then think about Eminem, it's almost like saying like denying the blackness of hip hop again because you're putting the face of a white person.
Right.
And it's like so I was just making that connection between the two.
Yeah. So let's just conclude on this point. Let's put the attendance up, and we'll talk more about this. But this is the question, right? Are we thinking about these things in individual terms, right? Because we can think about an individual racist or an individual, or somebody, or an individual's